Welcome into another episode of the SICTR Second. John Schaefer with you once again from the podcast room of the Digital Media Studio here inside of the Student Innovation Center on Iowa State University's campus. And a guest that I've been looking forward to having on this program for a while, someone that I've gotten to know very well and someone that's been a great partner of our space. And we're going to bring in James McNab now. And James, you're an assistant professor for the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communications, but also an Iowa State alumni, but someone I've really enjoyed developing this relationship that dates back not even just this fall when you started your SMC course 3520, but even further back to January, I'd say even the fall semester of last year.
Yeah, no, and honored to be on the show. Thank you for the opportunity. I know I've bugged you kind of like, hey, could I be on this? You know, it's like it's kind of
we
cool.
wanted you
I'd
here,
like
though.
to do it. I know, but sometimes you got to be cousin Oliver and you just kind of push away. But no, very early in my time in this appointment, I was introduced to this space even before I think you were in this role. During my interview process, they did a campus tour, and I kind of laughed at it. It's like, you know, I'm an alum. I kind of know where things are on this campus. But this building obviously was not here when I was a student. And so they brought me over and said, you know, this is they introduced me to Danny, your predecessor. They introduced me to the facility and showed it off. And I was like, this is gorgeous. Okay, well, can we use this? Oh, yeah. And that was part of the deal is that, you know, we wanted to build a relationship between the Greenlee School and SICTR, specifically the Digital Media Studio. You guys have been nothing but wonderful to us. We have come to you and said, hey, could we do this? Could we do this? Could we do this? Knowing full well that it's not just our space. We do need to be good tenants with the rest of campus. But, you know, to you, your staff, everybody has been such warm and welcoming, and we could not be successful without this space. And so I'm grateful for that.
Well, it's certainly been fun to see your SMC 3520 class, sports broadcasting production or sports broadcast production class come in for someone like me who comes from that world. But kind of explain your background a little bit more and how you got into sports media first and foremost.
Not something that I ever thought that I would do. Not something that I ever thought that I would be as successful by whatever you want to define as success in. Obviously, I was a journalism major here with the Greenlee School, graduated in 2000, and I think like everybody at that time, I went into news because that's just what you did from the broadcasting. There's 212 markets in the United States. They all have a news station. They all need people to tell the news. But I knew very early in my undergrad experience that I was never going to be on camera. You know, like even this scares me right now. Just looking at it, this is not where I'm comfortable. Yeah. I knew very early on that I was going to be better behind the camera. And so started as a news producer, which basically guaranteed me a job because everybody wants to be on camera. Nobody wants to do the work behind the camera and do that. And so I got started at KCCI, which was a wonderful experience for me. And then did that for a while and went to work for Paxson Communications, which doesn't exist anymore, as their director of creative services. And so made a lot of really bad car commercials because, you know, used, you know, the local commercials that you see. That was my job for a couple of years there. Went into the agency world because that was the kind of the next logical step. Really enjoyed editing, really enjoyed that content creation idea. And one of the clients that we had at this agency was a soccer tournament. It was not anything, it was just like this, I don't even know where they got the teams from. I don't know if they were high school kids or junior high kids, but it happened at the county fields, obviously down in south side of Des Moines. And they reached out to us and said, we want you to produce the DVDs that we are going to sell to basically pay to be able to use county. Right. No problem. And so we reached out to then TCI, now Mediacom, excuse me, then AT&T, because AT&T had already bought them by that point, now Mediacom, and said, can we use your production truck? Right. And so they roll out our production truck, and we literally are just, you know, kind of, we don't do this, and so but it's soccer, so it's ready one, take one, and we'll get back to you in a little bit. But they needed me to basically man the record decks, and because that was how we were going to make money. So I was sitting in the back of this production truck, first time ever in a production truck, and just making sure everything was at speed and levels were good. And then sitting in front of me was a replay controller. And so after about 3 or 4 games, it was, I wonder what this does, you know, type thing. And then on like the second day, it was, well, maybe we can try a replay, you know, from there, and that. So that was my first like remote sports experience that I ever did, was on this little soccer tournament
Yeah.
that I've never had heard of before and I've never heard of since at that point. Because of that experience, my former boss when I was at Paxson had gone on to MediaCom when they launched the Connections channel,
Okay.
and this would have been summer of 2003
Yep.
at this point. And he said, and they were spinning up, they were looking for new people, and my boss said, well, I know a guy that I think might be able to do this, because they didn't know as much as we did. And so I got onto a high school football game, and it happened to be Valley Dowling was the first one that I did, and that was my first time running replay on a football game, and it was as bad as you can expect it to be.
Got to start somewhere, though.
Yeah, but I mean, you're doing tape 3/4 inch replay, just trying to get this, and I remember I would have rips and tears and cuts to black and just the whole 9 yards, but did that. But they said, "Can you come back next week? Can you come back next week?" And next thing I know, I'm doing the whole season.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm doing the state football championships. And then basketball rolls around. And then. And so for the course of this, 2003, 2004, with MediaCom, I'm freelancing for the first time in my life, which is not something I ever thought I would do. And so about a year later, they had a full-time opening for a producer at the Connections Channel, and I applied for it because I could do this. And that led to a full-time position and appointment there. I was there for 3.5 more years. That was when I basically learned how to do sports at that point from a broadcast standpoint or from a live standpoint. And so because of that experience, met people who met people who met people, and then all of a sudden, hey, ESPN's coming to Iowa. They need, it's a an exhibition, preseason, non-conference, against some Podunk team. Can you do it? Sure. And the rest is history at that point. So and it's been, 22 years now, 23 years of this.
So your day-to-day outside of just teaching courses, you're still freelancing today. I mean, you're down at Kansas City Current. You were in Mississippi last week for a Jackson State football game. I mean, that's the life of a freelancer, but that's also how you make money in that world right now, isn't it?
No, it absolutely is. And I think the truth of this industry, or more than just about anyone else, is that you have to have those multi-gigs. You have to have that side hustle. Yeah. And so if you, as I tell my students, as I tell anybody that do this, if you specialize in just one thing, you will not be employable at that point unless you are the top 1/2 of 1% in the New York or Los Angeles market. Otherwise, you are just wasting your time. So you have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And for me, even as I've transitioned out of the day-to-day, corporate gigs and gotten into more of the academic world, being able to do that is the best professional development that I could ever ask for. I feel that I have an ethical obligation to my students to be able to say, this is what the industry is doing, this is what the world expects from us, and the only way that I do that is by actively being out there. Don't get me wrong. I would rather be at home. I would rather be. I have an absolutely supportive wife. I have an absolutely supportive son who do this because I'm gone. And when I'm not working, I work. And she has put up with that for the entire time we've been together. But it is what you need to do to be successful in this industry, and it's what I need to do to be successful for my students, and so that's why I do it.
And I'd certainly, to your last point, I think I've said that to multiple people, young people that just break into industry, you have to have a spouse or a partner that is incredibly supportive and understands what the grind is of the sports world. It's certainly a different life than just being on TV. It's a lot of dinner breaks missed. It's a lot of time on the road. It's a lot of places here or there. And so it takes a supportive spouse in that sense.
Absolutely. I joke, but it's not much of a joke. A lot of people that I know that do this full-time, that freelance full-time, are fat, bald, and divorced. And it's like, well, I got 2 out of 3 at this point. But she cares about me enough and is supportive enough that she puts up with me being gone for extended periods of time. And I'm grateful to her and Ben.
Well, and to your point, too, diving into that world in 2003, you're talking about linear replay editing. Nowadays, I'm so glad I didn't have to grow up in the tape era because nonlinear editing, from a perspective where I can drop and place clips where they need to go, is such a nice thing to be able to do. Now, that being said, there's so much innovation and evolution that's come in the TV world, and I even think that now we might be hitting a point where it's even becoming more evolutionary and with the emergence of AI. But that's where I said this to Danny Orris, who's my boss and someone you know very well. She comes from our background. Sports is great because you can't AI an athlete speaking. You can't AI the big touchdown play. And so in what way for your class, tying it back to what's operating out of here, how important is this sports broadcast production course in setting foundations for these students so that they can innovate with the solid cornerstone?
Exactly what you just said. I believe that sports broadcasting is the leading, bleeding edge of technological adoption throughout this entire industry. There's a reason that you kind of have this calendar that follows from the Super Bowl on. So basically, CBS and Fox use the Super Bowl to show off, to test some new technology because they've already got 90 other cameras doing the game. So adding that 91st that happens to do this is just something that, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. They can still cover the thing. But usually it works. And then about 6 to 8 weeks after the Super Bowl, the trades all come out, videography, broadcasting, and cable, all those great ones talk about, did you see what they did at the Super Bowl? And look how this is game-changing. And then by April, when NAB happens, you have all the vendors saying, we're now adopting this technology. And then it's lather, rinse, and then it's available for the start of, basically the college football season that fall, and then it's lather, rinse, repeat, and do it all over again. From a foundational standpoint, I always have believed that technological innovations are ultimately democratizing. They basically clear barriers at this point. And the best thing about them is that they never pull the top down. They always raise the bottom. There is still going to be a need for someone who knows how to time a tape deck, properly white balance the camera, make sure that you know how to read a histogram, all the things that we do in our life that maybe is not as needed as it once was because we don't need to worry as much about white balance as we used to. Should we still white balance? Absolutely. And so because of those innovations, you basically can have a group of people, especially students, who can start being exposed to it earlier and earlier in their lives, being true digital natives at that point. So that by the time they come to us, we're not fumbling with, this is the end of the camera that you point at something to create an image. We're able to say, all right, you've done this. I'm going to show you how to make it awesome at that point. And to me, that's the great advantage of technological evolution, and not just in sports media, but in all aspects of content creation, visual or otherwise. That is the great advantage of it.
Well, and we've seen content creation explode, the need for it, especially you talked about being in the content creation world. From an agency standpoint, I've been there too, but it seems like there's more and more need for it because people are realizing the impact of storytelling, and that's something that I think, yes, it's existed time and time again, but it doesn't, when it gets too gimmicky, it becomes kind of inauthentic. And I think an authentic voice goes back to that in sports or anything these students are doing.
Right. And that's really, again, the really great thing about what we hope to try to accomplish at the Greenlee School, and I think any media communications journalism program wants to accomplish. These students these days have been digital natives since the day they were born. I mean, they have, every single last one of them knows how to create content. I could go in on the first day of a class. How many of you, before you've ever walked in this class, have created a video and 90% of the hands are going to go up? That's fine. Now we can focus you. Effort is wonderful. Effort without focus is a waste of time. So how can you take what you're doing and turning it in a way that someone else is going to want to consume that content at that point? It is so stupid simple to self-publish nowadays. Why wouldn't you? Case in point, what we're doing in the class being a prime example. When you and I were students, when I was a student, if you wanted to get on the air, if you wanted to make television, you had to go to the student television station. You had to go to the student radio station. You had to go to the student newspaper, that had these resources to be able to publish, broadcast, make available. And that was the gatekeeping. Every single person on this campus can pull out their phone right now and go live and generate an audience. The audience may be 5 people, but it's an audience at that point. So now it's about, okay, we have removed any barriers for you to be able to get your content out. Now we have to work for you to make sure that your content sticks out in a phenomenally crowded ecosystem. So that's our goal.
And lasting as well.
Yes.
At that point. You can have a one-off that goes viral, but how do you create a lasting impact, I think is the big thing.
And the nice thing about it is it has been comforting that the methods and the techniques that I was taught, and I think you were taught, we were all taught at this point, stand the test of time. You know, there's a reason that this industry has been doing the same thing for 100 years at this point, because we know it works at this point. So it's just a matter of saying, okay, you've been doing it this way, let's push you this way and watch what happens at that point.
So with that in mind, too, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the sports media major here at Greenlee now, and then also the digital storytelling major that was just announced that'll start in the fall of 26. How did that kind of come about from your perspective, and how, I guess, how far forward is it moving the university's communications program?
I think it is I know that it is a direct result of the request and the demand that we are seeing from the students at this point. When I was an enrollee, I never like to call myself a student. I was not worthy of the title student when I was here. When I was an enrollee, at least on the broadcast side, everybody wanted to be a reporter, an anchor, you know, kind of that on-air aspect of it. That's just what they did. You still see that, but it is now transitioned to a sports environment. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with how we as consumers are basically consuming this media. With the exception of sports and one or two other things, a hypermajority of the content that we do not watch in real time as it's happening. We are streaming it, we are DVRing it, we are watching it later, we are binging it, you know, go from there. You're seeing that change in news, which used to be, you know, you had to sit down at 6 o'clock to find out what the news of the day was. Sports is still the one thing that we collectively get together and say, I got to watch this moment. I got to watch because I'm not going to, you know, tape it and watch it again. I already know the outcome at that point. So both of those majors are a direct result of what our students are coming to us saying, this is what we want to do, this is what we think the jobs of the end of the future are. But more importantly, what we're looking around and saying, this is no longer the direction this industry is moving. It's now moving in this industry, and we are doing our best to respond to those industries. Obviously, and this is my fourth semester here at Iowa State, so I'm still the young guy, relatively speaking. I know that both of those majors were well underway before I ever walked in the door. So credit goes to Beth and Jerry and everybody on those teams that have pushed those majors forward, because it's having seen how the sausage is made. It takes effort to put a major, but it is a direct result of what we see as a changing industry, period, and saying, all right, the days of being the newspaper publisher and screaming, you know, stop the presses because we have this breaking news, that's not going to exist anymore. So, but the desire to share a story is universal. And we're just basically adjusting. Instead of doing it this way, you're going to do it this way as a result of what we're seeing that the world does.
Right. And I think, you know, to your point, sports connects communities in a lot of ways. It's kind of a release from reality in a lot of ways for people as well. And also, it is live. If you watch it delayed, I've tried countless times to watch a sporting event delayed. I'd hop on Twitter for a quick second, and there it is. But then you think back to the variants, go back to the 1980 Olympic hockey game. USA plays USSR. They tape delayed that. And I remember my dad talking about that and how bizarre that is to think they could tape delay a monumental moment in sports history and keep it under wraps for the most part. It's insane.
That moment, the miracle on it the miracle on ice is great can use as an example for a lot of things. But the fact that when I tell people that don't know that, it was tape delayed, and kind of like, wait, what? How did they keep it under wraps? It's like there were only like 300 people, I think, at the arena at Lake Placid, and it just took time for the story to get out because it was just so unexpected. My other one's obviously the infamous Heidi matchup for our audience that doesn't know. This was late 60s, early 70s. NBC was airing I think it was a Lions game at that point, and they were scheduled to start airing the movie version of Heidi, and basically the Lions were driving, and they were driving, and they were driving, and they were getting ready to score, and they were doing anything, and 7 o'clock rolls by, and the master control operator in New York says, well, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to go roll Heidi and cut away. And, of course, the switchboard just, exploded at that point. And by the time they were able to patch them back in, the game was over, and you missed, kind of these moments. So there are these opportunities bring us together. And I would argue that content in all of its form has always brought us together. It's just what is the content that is currently bringing us together. there was the period of the golden age of television, where everybody was investing, I think really driven by HBO, really investing significant dollar amounts into making basically movies onto the television. So you would gather around the water cooler and say, did you see The Sopranos, or did you see Deadwood, or did you see, this thing from there?
Yeah.
That still exists. It's just, I think the pendulum right now is going to sports. It'll be very interesting to see where it is 5 years from now.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to predict, especially with all the disruptive things that are simply going on in this industry. But it then comes back to, regardless of if it's sports or if it's news or if it's narrative or if it's whatever, we still have the ability to kind of bring a community together, however you want to define that community, and say, did you see what happened last night? And so that's to me is the great advantage of this industry.
With this space in particular that you're able to operate out of, how has that allowed you getting hands-on experience for these students versus just reading in a textbook or having lecture series?
There was no way that I was going to conduct this course as a lecture. There was no way that I was going to conduct this course as this is how they would do it at ESPN, because that's no. The fact that this facility exists, the fact that we are able as students, as members of the Iowa State community, to walk into this room and use broadcast quality equipment, stuff that I have used in the field, stuff that, this is no different than what you're going to be experiencing, elsewhere. That has made this course. There is no way we would have been a tenth as successful as what I think we've been successful if we had not had the ability to create, the content and use the equipment here. So the fact that it is available, the fact that it is maintained, the fact that it works, the fact that they can take a camera, I know on a built-up, the zoom's here and the focus here. You can now run any built-up camera in the world because of that. I know that on the switcher, program is above preset. You can now run any switcher in the world. Yeah. And so just having this simulation of real-world practices without real-world obligations, I guess is a good way to describe that, has made sports broadcast production. That's the SMC 3520 class, and I would not have wanted. I don't want to say that I would have refused it, because it is my job. It is my job to teach, and so I can't just be like, no, I'm not going to teach that class. It's like, why am I here otherwise? But it was very early in this whole partnership that it was like, if we're going to do this class, it must happen in this type of facility at this point, and otherwise, it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless.
Well, and the other important part to that is you have some foundation here that you're able to then transfer back to Hamilton Hall as you guys revamp your studio over there.
Yeah, no, and so if you look at the history, and this is where the advantage of being kind of having the history and the institutional knowledge that I have as a student here, the video program in all of its forms has always bounced to other parts of campus before coming back at Hamilton Hall. When I was a student here, we were in Exhibit Hall, which, if you're familiar with the Iowa State campus, is now where Hal Hall roughly is. So that was the original WOI television facility from the 1940s and the 1950s, and looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1940s and the 1950s. But because it had all those resources, they basically let us just run wild in there. And so that's where we learned everything. Yep. And when I was a student here, it was right after the sale of WI to by the university, and WI's moved down, obviously, from Ames down to Des Moines, and so the WI building, which is now the comms building, was going to be the next facility. Yeah. So they were in the process of renovating that. So it was like my late junior year, early my senior year, was when we moved into WI at that point. And again, because it was not really just our space. It was we were always having to work around other people. We're fine with that. Yeah. We understand that we are not the sole tenant of the digital media studio. That has advantages. It has disadvantages. And so as a result of knowing that this is not solely our space, we are once again coming back to Hamilton. And so as a response to the digital storytelling major spinning up, the sports media major up, and just because we need to have this. The Anderson studio, which is, I split my time as a student between Exhibit and Anderson, is being renovated as we speak to basically match, if not perfectly duplicate, what we have over here. Does not mean that we are leaving SICTR by any stretch of the imagination. I will be sending students and we will be conducting this class as long as I am here, because it is an excellent resource. But there are enough momentum that we realized that we could really be beneficial from having a space where we don't have to tear down the second we're done because another group is coming in to use the space. When we do a show, we spend the first 10, 15 minutes building a set, which is not really a set, it's just tables and a tablecloth at that point. And so if you watch our shows from episode to episode, there's enough, just a little variety in the things that should be consistent because lights have been adjusted, or we didn't put the camera exactly where we were the day before. No problem with that.
Right.
I actually think having the students having to build, having to set, that's a real world process, because Lord knows when we go to the University of Iowa or go to K-State or wherever we are, we're not, it's not like they're set and ready for football. We have to, the truck has to roll up, we have to roll out cables, we have to do all that. So having that experience is a good thing, but it would help in the consistency of the final product, just to know, okay, light 14 is the key for the left anchor up, and we're done, as opposed to hold up, let's
reposition. Exactly.
And climbing up on a ladder, I should not be doing that.
Leave that to them. Yes.
For none of us should be doing that. But it's like we just want to be able to walk in and kind of turnkey it to a left from there. And so, because of our experience here, it has said, okay, we need to have one of our own as well. We will still be coming back. I promise you that. But I also will tell you that in designing our studio, we looked at this space and said, what do they have? What do they have? What do they have? What do they have? Because I knew very early on that if we built our studio and it was below in any way what's available, across this room here, why would they come to us? Why would our students come here when they have a superior facility over here? So we had to match, and in some cases exceed, what's available here. Even if knowing the trade-offs of not having it be a fully controllable space on our end, not having to share and reset every time. I'll put up with, having to move a light if I have superior facility. Yes. That's all said and done. So that really became our benchmark very quickly. Yeah.
And with that update to Hamilton Hall, I mean, you think of, there are a handful of journalism schools across the country that are synonymous with the top tier.
Of course.
And from my experience, when we'd hire interns from Iowa State, the ones that were eager were the ones that I loved having, and the Iowa Staters were the eager ones. And typically had a good foundation when they'd walk in because of the experience that they had within Greenlee News when they were doing that and things. And I think this is going to allow Iowa State to compete in a different way. But I think foundationally, the mindset of an Iowa State graduate is, I've had to work my butt off. I'm not walking in with the mindset of being, a Syracuse grad or a Mizzou grad, but I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways, and not to tarnish or knock on any of those schools. But from my experience, the ones that have had to hustle through their college programs are the ones I loved working with and hiring.
I would love to have Arizona State money.
Yeah.
I would love to have Ball State and have David Letterman writing me, checks the entire time. I would love to have the connections that Mizzou has. They're generally considered one of the best broadcast programs in the country.
Yes.
Columbia, Syracuse, kind of the names in our industry. And I know that our students are competing against that upper echelon. I joke that I went to an engineering school to get a journalism degree, and I was in a fraternity with a bunch of engineering majors, and those guys made more on their first job than it took me a decade to make. Just because of the nature of the industry, and also just because it's Iowa State. Yeah, I chose to come here for a lot of reasons, mostly because I really fell in love with the campus and said this is where I wanted to continue. But more importantly, this is why when I had the opportunity to come home, to say you can come teach for the same program that you got your start in. Yeah, like, are you kidding me? Where do I start?
It's a no-brainer, right?
It was the easiest decision I've and to date the best decision I've ever made, other than asking my wife to marry me. No, we know that where we are in the whole scheme of things, and there are things that I think we are phenomenally good at, and in some cases I would put us up against anything that those names would do. And just because of the nature of the resources and the reputation and the connections within the industry, we know that I know for a fact that I had a boss that if a Mizzou resume came across, or a Mizzou reel came across his desk, kind of moved to the top. It just from there. We understand that. As a result, there's a little bit of fire to it, but that's true of anyone. Even you have to have that to be successful in this industry. You have to hustle. You have to work. Even as not even a full-time freelancer, just a guy who does it when he's not working. I still have to make phone calls. I still have to be like, you got anything this? No, okay, cool, thank you. I'll call you tomorrow. Type situation.
Absolutely.
And that's just the nature of the industry. And so the fact that we're able to provide that environment, or at least how to react to that environment, as opposed to, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, you're Arizona State, which is not fair to my colleagues at Arizona State. But
again, we're not knocking them by any means. They are top tier for a reason.
Yeah, no, you don't become the Cronkite School just because Walter Cronkite decides to put your name on. You have to earn that title. But it is like, oh God, you walk into those places and you're like, my kingdom to have
exactly.
a tenth of this, and so. We go to war with the army we have, not the army we wish that we have. And you learn that, and you're going to be successful in this industry. Yeah.
Well, it's been a fun conversation on this front. Let's get to our quick fire that I like to do with some people. And 5 questions. Haven't given these to you prior. Can be quick answer, long answer, whatever you kind of want to do with them, all right? So we'll lead with best sporting event you've ever worked.
That would be the 2012 All-Star Home Run Derby, where Robinson Cano struck out every single time he got up. So it was hosted in Kansas City, and Country Breakfast was, he was the team captain for the American League, and he had announced that there should be a player from the host team, which was, and I'm going to draw a blank on it. It was Country Breakfast there, and so he was going to be on the team, and then he wasn't, and so Kansas City just turned on him like there was no tomorrow. And so he gets up to bat, and all of Kaufman is just raining boos like he is no tomorrow. And we're all in the truck
for an all-star home run derby.
For the home run derby, which is supposed to be the fun, lighthearted type thing. But they're just booing like there is no tomorrow. And then he gets, you get the 10 hits, you get 10 outs and you're done. And all 10 of them, not a single one was a home run. And so it went from boo, crack, boo, yes! And then boo, and it's just there. And I was in the back of the truck going, this is the greatest television I've ever been a part of in my life. So yeah, it's the 2012 Home Run Derby.
All righty. Most influential sports media figure. And this is preference. This is a subjective one.
It is a phenomenally subjective one. For me, I got to give credit to Mel Crippen, which is if you're and that's just for me.
Yeah.
Mel Crippen, obviously longtime radio voice here for KSI and the Ames, was basically the guy who taught me how to produce. At this point, and so he taught me about producing the live event, I should say. I had the pleasure of working with him on some Drake basketball very early in my career with Mediacom, and so Mel really just in studying him and following him about how he structured a story, especially in a live sporting event. You lose control the second of opening kickoff or the second tip-off happens, and you're just reacting at that point. And he just kept it right here. Early in my career, I was a screamer. I've tried to calm down, and so I just tried to be like, what would Mel do, and how could I be a little bit better for that?
Best pizza spot in Ames?
Jeff's.
Yes,
in fact, because I had to put in one of my in my video production class, one of the projects is we do a commercial at that point, just to kind of get the idea of the commercial production, and I had to basically put a no Jeff's moratorium on it because everybody was going to Jeff's, and I was like, okay, we've had enough Jeff's pizza, but it's very good pizza.
All righty, fair enough. Favorite sport to work that isn't football or basketball?
It's. If it was watching, it'd be baseball because that's the only sport that I don't like putting on TV because I'd rather be in the stands.
Yes.
But to produce, if it's not football or basketball, that's hard because it really is basketball is the one I like because it's always over at the quickest time. Hockey is weird. Volleyball, you're just praying that they win 3 sets and you're done. So it's not football or basketball. I guess I would say wrestling at that point, just because, especially and that's the Iowa thing.
Yeah.
And having done obviously Iowa State matches, having done Cyhawk matches, having done Iowa games or Iowa meets, the state just gets into it. The state understands wrestling at the high school, at the collegiate level, and we had the trials, the Olympic trials, a couple years ago in Iowa City, and even in that audience, they were still it's an Iowa audience and stuff.
Yeah.
Do that. So yeah, I'll say wrestling.
I actually really quick have to agree with you on wrestling.
Yeah.
Those state wrestling tournaments, shooting that event is the most chaotic 3 days of shooting you'll ever have in a year.
Yes.
But the finals night is the most electric environment in all of high school sports.
I love it. The Parade of Champions at the beginning, the Grand Parade where they all walk out is great. And then I always love the senior going for the fourth title, and then they get up on they've been doing it for a billion years. You put all 8 of them on the podium, and they do that slow push in and the coach comes and he puts the medal and he gives them the hug, and then they cut to the crowd, and the crowd is on their feet. Like there's no because winning 4 for 4 that is the achievement in this state. So
and the idea that the entire town will come out to support one finalist, and that is why Wells Fargo, now Casey Center, is always packed on finals night. So.
And usually from Don Bosco of Gilbertville being the strong contenders at that point. So.
Yes, sir. So last one, how do you get away from the sports world in your downtime?
I do everything in my power not to watch sports. When I'm not working an event, I have no interest in watching sports in any way, shape, or form. If Sunday morning, if I land at 9 o'clock, the last thing I'm going to do is turn on NFL Today and do that. I do. If I'm not being compensated to do it, I don't care about sports as much as possible. There's got to be a clear. I'm done with that world. Yeah. Otherwise, I will be burned out very quickly.
This is a follow-up to that. Is it hard to watch games that you don't produce?
No, because I know that the producers are reacting to an environment that I would have reaction, and how you react to this is going to be different than how somebody else reacts from there. What I can't watch anymore is news. Okay. Because I always go, why are you leading with that story? That's not, why did you stack it that way? Yes. And I'm like, oh, just don't take that. And so I just can't watch news anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think we need to get off the D block sports block.
Thank you.
I think sports should be leading on Friday nights and just never go to anything else.
Other
than weather.
No, weather. And that was the big thing in coming to Iowa, was learning just how important weather was.
Yeah.
Because, I grew up in the East Coast, and so weather, we had rain occasionally, and that was it. And now you're out here in, the tip of Tornado Alley and all that stuff like that. Weather drove my shows the time I was at KCCI. On one hand, as a producer, it was great to be like, hey, here's 3 minutes that I don't have to worry about, because I'm just like, weather has 3 minutes, you're done. And those guys hit it every single time. But especially in morning news, the second weather took over, it's like, well, I've spent 8 hours writing the show. Now we're talking about school closings. Let's go. Yeah, no, weather drives the story here in Central Iowa.
And you got to work with one of the best in John McLaughlin.
I did. I got to work with John. I got to work with Brian Carrick, was my morning anchor. Jason Parkin, and it was Mike Lozano originally, and then Curtis Gertz came back during my time there. So my time at KCCI was as a 22-year-old still in college, to be handed the keys for the #1 morning show in the state of Iowa by Dave Busey saying, don't mess it up, whatever you do, and having the resources that were at that station was just a wonderful experience.
News world's an interesting one. You make a lot of connections. Some of your best friends come out of it, and there are things you miss about it every day. There are certainly things you don't miss about it every day, too.
I have to say, post my news career, that there was about a 6-month period where there would be a breaking news, something happening, and my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, thank God I don't have to cover this. And that was kind of my post-traumatic stress dealing with that.
Absolutely. Well, we'll finish with this question. What does innovation mean to you?
Innovation is opportunity. And I'll go back to the comment that I made earlier about how technological evolution ultimately clear barriers. We are going to provide opportunities through innovation that you could not have even thought of. Yeah. And that's ultimately what it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate you being here and keep operating that course out of our space. And excited to see what Greenlee has built up over there at Hamilton.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the opportunity.
All righty. Well, we'll be right back here on the SICTR Second with our list of events coming up here in the building over the next couple of weeks. Once again, a big thank you to James McNab for joining us on today's show here on the SICTR Second. Certainly appreciate the perspective and innovation he's helping lead the way with over there at the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication, a key part in all of that. Certainly looking forward to seeing what his course continues to do here inside of the Digital Media Studio. One quick look and a quick reminder of events coming up here. The big one that I want to circle on your calendars is October 30th, 6 to 9 p.m. on the first floor atrium and stepatorium to an extent. We will have All Makers Eve going on. We'll have a costume contest. We'll have a creation contest. We'll have scrap art. We'll also have snacks, giveaways, things like that as well. So certainly be sure to join us here 6 to 9 p.m. October 30th inside of the Student Innovation Center. That's really the big and only major event to keep tabs on here. So thank you again for joining us on the SICTR Second. Until next time, I'm John Schaefer. Have a great day.